Hi, and welcome to the board wrap-up show for June 2016. We've got Superintendent Dr. Pennington with us today, and I know that a lot of you want to hear about the school budget for next year. Dr. Pennington, a public hearing. Have we settled on a school budget for 2016, 2017?
Well, we have. We went through our every year at this time of the year. We have a budget hearing where we uh, present to the public and to the board our best estimate of the amount of revenue we're going to have next year and how we intend to spend that money. This year it's probably more of a guess than it's been in a while. And so what that budget looks like, I guess, you can call it the highlights or the lowlights. The highlight is that we're cutting our expenditures by right at $1.8 million, we've had about a $34 million budget for the last several years, and now we're going to be somewhere closer to $32 million. The vast majority of those cuts are going to come in personnel. But the reason for that is because that's our biggest expenditure. I mean, 90% of the money we spend is on staff, and so when we have to make budget cuts, staff is what we cut. So the way that it's going to present thatself is that we'll have less teachers at the high school next year and less teachers at West. Those were two sites where, when we looked at our numbers and the number of kids that teachers were serving on a daily basis, they had the lowest class sizes in the district, and it's the place where we could make class sizes higher and still stay pretty close to the 1017 class size limits. And we haven't really enforced 1017 in this state since 2009, but that's still kind of a guide that we use. And so the difference will be that at West and the high school, maybe where a teacher would have served 125 kids a day last year, this year those numbers will be somewhere closer to 140. It means that students will have a few more students in each classroom. But we've been able to do that so far without affecting course offerings except in one area, and I'll get to that in a minute. We've been able to maintain our fine arts programs. We've not made any cuts in orchestra, band, vocal music as of today, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. So our classes are going to be bigger, teachers are going to be serving more kids, but it's not going to be as bad as it possibly could be if the state economy does not turn around, or the legislature next session does not get serious and really take a long-term approach to how do we fix the funding problem that we have in Oklahoma school districts. And it's been on the news every day, right? All last spring, it was every day. It was about the state budget. It continues to be about the state budget. One of the things that the public's been told, the legislature adjourned and said, hey, we didn't cut education spending, or we cut it less than anybody else. Well, that's really not true. It gets down to, the phrase smoke and mirrors, how you distract or you put false images up. Just to give you an example, last week, the State Department of Education did their budget. And so the way the State Department is allocated X number of dollars for state aid, then they have another budget after that they call their activities budget, and that's just the phrase they use, and that's where the line items are for like teacher health insurance, professional development money, alternative education, textbooks. There's a whole long list of other programs that education money goes to that affects schools, that come to schools, but they're not in the state aid formula. One of those is textbooks. I think most people would agree that textbooks are pretty important. We adopt textbooks in this state on a subject matter basis, so we adopt reading books in a given year. We do science books, we do literature, we do grammar books, we would do mathematics, we would do all those things at different times, and And next year, for the 2016-17 school year, is the year where you do the research and the planning and you decide what new math book you're going to purchase, new math adoption you're going to do for the 17-18 school year. Well, so the last time we adopted math books was 7 years ago. So what happened is the legislature took the money for, ever since I've been a superintendent, the state's allocated $33 million for textbooks, which comes out to about $50 a kid, which is about half of what it costs to buy a textbook, by the way. It used to be that $33 million or $50 a kid would buy you a textbook, but because we don't fund our schools in Oklahoma the way we ought to, and because so we haven't increased that textbook allocation for, I think, it may be 30 years since we've increased that textbook allocation. But this year, they zeroed that account out, and they took that $33 million and they put it into the state aid formula. So schools are still getting that money, but it just means that there's no textbook money. And so school districts across the state are going to have to make a decision about whether or not they're going to buy new math textbooks. So just to give you an example, in our district last year, the year we're just now finishing, we bought new literature textbooks, reading textbooks. So we used that money from the state, which is about $250,000 from the state of Oklahoma. We had some money because the people of this community have been generous enough to give us about $200,000 a year in bond money to buy textbooks. Now you think about that. Because the state hasn't properly funded textbooks, we have to use bond funds to buy to help us buy textbooks that we need. And on top of that, we spent another $300,000 of district general fund revenue. So we spent somewhere in the neighborhood of $700,000 on textbooks for next year. The most of that money was local money, either bond money or general fund money that bought our textbooks. But because of the budget cuts that we have, because of the budget cuts we took this year, because of the budget cuts we've got in place for next year, I don't have $250,000 that I can use to supplement the state's decision to not fund textbooks. So we're going to have a real tough decision to make next year about, do we buy new textbooks for the 2017-18 school year? Those textbooks will last for 7 years. And so, people may say, well, you just don't buy textbooks next year. Buy them the next year. Well, we got another adoption the next year. So if we only get, we get $33 million the next year, but that's for the 2018-19 adoption. I think that may be grammar and composition books. That's an expensive adoption. So one problem creates another problem, creates another problem. And the people that suffer for this are the kids. They're going to have, we've adopted new math standards. So now we're going to have textbooks that we're going to try to get some more time out of that don't align with the standards that our teachers are teaching and our students are going to be assessed on. And we believe these standards are important to have our kids be college and career ready, but they're not important enough to buy textbooks that align with the standards. That was a pretty big political fight to adopt. So we just kind of keep shooting ourselves in the foot. We just kind of can't get out of our own way sometimes with the problems we have. And again, why are we in this situation? Because the state legislature, for at least the last 6 years, has fallen head over heels, giving every tax cut they could think of to give. Whether it was an income tax cut, whether it was an intangible tax cut, whether it's been a property tax cut, anything they could do to cut taxes, they've done that without thinking about the repercussions of what happens when you don't have revenue. They have borrowed money. We don't borrow money in this state, but they borrow money. and then they have to pay that money back, which hurts the budget in the future. So we just don't have a good financial plan, and somebody's, we're going to have to come together, bring a lot of smart people in a room, and have some real honest discussions about the financial future of the state, and then find out if we can make the tough decisions to make it better. Because all we're doing right now is we keep kicking the can down the road, so to speak. We're going to get by this year. We're worried about next year, and the next year we kick it down. We're going to worry about the year after that, and so because of that, we're just not making good decisions. At the end of the day, the people that pay for that are our children, and we pay for it because we don't have the state that most of us want to have and we want to live in, and it's a tough deal. Now, on the other part of that, I mentioned, just to go back on a couple of things, I mentioned we talked about budget yesterday as we were doing our budget presentation. We got one last state aid cut. Even though the fiscal year is over June 30th, they sent one more out, and so we lost another $165,000 in revenue. So, not anything you can do about it this time of year. We've cut all we can cut. We just absorbed that, and our carryover will be that much less next year, which means that, we thought we had a good enough fund balance. We were starting to think about, well, maybe we might go back in one of the positions we've cut we might go hire a teacher in that area. Well, now we have to really think about that really hard because we've lost that money. We said that we have not cut any programs out. One of the positions that we have not filled is we actually had a teacher who taught French for us last year part-time. And we have tried to find a French teacher that can either teach English or teach math or teach something else because we don't have enough students to have a full-time French teacher, but we want to offer French. So we need that person to either work for us part-time or we need somebody who can teach more than one subject. As we are in front of the camera today, we can't find anybody. The truth is we don't really have an application from somebody to teach French that we consider to be a quality application. So we may end up not offering French next year in the Ponca City schools. Now, is it a budget cut? Is it an elimination of a program? Well, if you can't find somebody to fill the job, I don't consider that an elimination. We're not doing that for budget purposes. We're just doing it because we can't find anybody. The same thing is starting to happen with music. We've had an elementary music position posted for about 3 weeks now, and we don't have any applicants. We had our middle school music teacher at West came in and resigned. I think either Friday. I think she resigned Friday. We're very concerned that we're going to be able to fill that position, that there will be somebody out there who wants to teach music at West Middle School. Now, we could take an elementary music teacher and move them into the West position, but then instead of being down one elementary music teacher, now we're down 2 elementary music teachers, and we're not able to provide that experience for our elementary students. And I told the board last night that we're really starting to see, we've talked about a teacher shortage for a while, but what we're really starting to see, again, because we've not paid teachers what we should pay them, fewer and fewer young people are going into teaching. More and more of our teachers are going out of state. And so, you reap what you sow. And we're seeing it starting to see it in those kind of specialty classes. So I'm concerned. I'm concerned. We may have more position cuts, not because we want to cut those positions, but because we can't find staff to fill those positions.
Of those position cuts, was it done by retirement, or how did you determine who does not return to Ponca
Okay.
City.
So what we did is we told folks back in March that we were probably going to do this and gave them a chance if they wanted to find other positions. We were able to make those cuts through attrition, either through retirements, people who voluntarily left the district because they either didn't want to teach anymore or they got a job in another district. There were a few positions where we did not want to bring that person back. We weren't going to bring them back anyway. And so when we met with them and talked about their future in the district, they went ahead and submitted resignations, and we did not fill those jobs. But anybody who wanted to continue to teach in the Ponca City schools, who was in a position that we no longer staff, we found something else for them in the district.
I want to go back to the budget and the state legislature for a minute, because I interviewed a state representative this week, and pretty adamant about the fact that there was a zero cut in education this year by the state legislature. And he talked about the fact that the same amount of money that was given last year is appropriated for this year, which is, I guess, interpreted as a zero cut. I want to hear your interpretation of that.
Well, I would say that's not accurate. Our cut, they did not restore the funding that we had July 1st of 2016. So when you tell me you're not cutting me, that means that I would have the same amount of money that I had July 1st, 2016. Now, it is true that the cuts that we took, that we are at the same level that we were after the revenue failures were announced and cuts were made to account for those revenue failures. So, I mean, it's kind of a somatic thing. We did not get cut anymore, but we have less money in our public schools for the 16-17 school year than we started the 15-16 school year with. But you can't just look at that. You have to also look at that. You have to look at you got to look at every state source of revenue we have. Yes, we have state aid, and they did hold state aid to the cut that was put in place in January. Really, it's the January and March. They came back and filled in that March cut with some rainy day money. But what they did is they took, again, I just mentioned, they eliminated textbooks. $33 million of textbook money that is gone, that is now in the state aid budget. So I'm glad that we've got state aid money, but we don't have money to buy textbooks. They cut alternative education. They didn't say we don't have to do alternative education anymore, but they cut the alternative education budget. They cut professional development from the state completely out. They cut some funding for child nutrition. So yes, state aid, which is the biggest part of, and that is the biggest part of our budget. State aid, which is critical to us, is at the same level that it was as we ended the school year, but it is less than we had in 15-16. And the thing I always go, I know people get tired of hearing this, but you got to remember that we started last year with $198 less per weighted ADM than we had in 2008, 2009. They'd already cut us in Ponca City. That is $1.6 million a year. I had $1.6 million a year less to spend when I started the 15-16 school year than I had in 2008, 2009. I have more kids in this district. So we added to that cut. And, we're still trying to calculate it out exactly what does it work on a weighted ADM basis. We think that, just kind of preliminary numbers, that we have about, I'm not talking about textbook money and alternative ed and those kinds of things. When you just look at the state aid appropriation, we're going to be about $50 less per kid than we were at the beginning of the 15-16 school year. So I don't know how that's less money. I think that's a cut.
Bottom line, there are still a lot of decisions, I guess, this summer that are going to be made. How far can you go before you say we can't do a certain program?
Well, we think that we have put together a budget, and the budget we presented to the board last night was very conservative. We presented a budget that was based upon a $200 per weighted ADM cut. So we think that the state aid cut is going to be 50. We've got to go in and calculate. If you add textbooks to that, you add alternative ed to that, I think it comes up to about $75 less per kid. So we've got some cushion built in. But the other part of this, Phil, is the budget that was passed is based upon revenue projections. Okay, I'm not sure that I believe that the revenue projections that are in the budget are accurate and are gonna make it. This time last year, they presented us with a budget that had revenue projections in it, and we talked last year. And I said, I'm hearing those numbers aren't right, and that we're going to have a shortfall of about $1 billion, which is what we ended up having. So I'm not sure I trust the numbers that are in there, and so we're going to be very conservative, and we plan on operating our school district on $1.6 million less than what we had this time last year. If something happens and we get into December, January, February, and the budget numbers have been good, the revenue's been good, then we'll have some extra money at the end of the year.
Anything else about the board meeting that you wanted to talk with your constituents about?
I would just say this, that budgeting is tough, and if somebody watches the budget hearing last night, there's not a lot of questions from the board. Part of the reason for that is we've been talking about this extensively for the last 6 months. Even though we revealed the budget to the public last night for the first time, our board members were all aware pretty early of what was in that budget. They knew the cuts were coming. There wasn't really a whole lot to talk about. We knew that we were doing that by cutting staff. Some districts have had these big pronouncements about we're cutting this and we're cutting that, and we haven't done that. I think that I don't know that it served us any purpose. We know we had our public meeting back in March and kind of laid out to the public what we thought these cuts might be. Right now, we're able to preserve all of our extracurricular activities. Now again, and I think this is something that the public has to understand, it's possible that I could have a teacher, band teacher, orchestra teacher, a coach of some kind walk in and resign tomorrow, and I may not be able to replace them. And that not being able to replace them would cause us to no longer continue a program. I know that sounds, how can that happen? I'm just telling you that what we're seeing right now in the application pool, that there are not very many free agent teachers that don't have jobs that are out there. The ones that have been eliminated from districts have already gone other places and gotten jobs. Most of them have gone out of state. You're not going to recruit anybody into Oklahoma. We're going to be 50th in the nation in what we spend in education when we start next year. And the question about the legislator who said we didn't cut the education budget. I mean, you can get into semantics with that. I think I'm very happy that the legislature made K-12 spending a priority, and whether we got cut 1%, 2%, 5%, whatever it was, it's a lot less than everybody else got cut, and we have to be thankful for small blessings, I guess. But we are going to feel the pain of this budget in this community and in this state. Now, you may not, we're going to protect our students as much as we can, but our class sizes are going to be bigger this year, and we're probably going to have less class offerings than we've normally had. But that's going to pale in comparison to what social services are going to be cut. It's going to pale into comparison to what the nursing homes are going to go through and the healthcare providers. It's going to pale in comparison to what higher ed is going to go through. Anybody who's listening to this that has made the statement that, oh, government, we can starve government to death, well, you're going to get a pretty good peek at this year. And I am extremely concerned about the future. If we don't see changes in Oklahoma City next year in how we create our budget, what we think about revenue, if revenue continues to be an evil word, because right now increased revenue is a bad word in the legislature. The folks that we have in Oklahoma City right now, they don't want increased revenue. They've taken action, purposeful action over the last 6 years to lower revenue as much as they can. Okay, so if we're not purposeful in finding ways to get new revenue, we have to be smart about what we do. We have to be smart about how we appropriate it. But if we continue to think that we can operate the state of Oklahoma on less money than we operated on the year before, I can't even imagine I don't know how our schools are going to open the next year. I just don't know what's going to happen. And I know that we talk about money a lot, and it seems like we still have school. But I'm going to tell you, as the superintendent of the Ponca City Public Schools, the education that we're offering next year is not going to be the same quality that it was 6 years ago. It's not going to be the same quality. We're not going to offer our students the same experiences. We're not able to do that. And we're not able to do it because we've done anything wrong. That's the aggravating part of this. It's not that the district hasn't been good stewards of money. It's not that the district has spent money they should not have spent or spent money inappropriately. These are all things that have happened because of a lack of revenue in this state to support public education. And the other thing I hope our people remember is that right now we're in crisis, and that crisis is because of, or we keep hearing this about the oil industry. Just remember that when we had record revenues in 2012, 2013, 2014, we did not put money back into public education that we cut in 2009, 2010. So, yes, elected officials can blame this on the oil industry collapse if they want to, but the reality is when there was money available for them to invest in our public schools, they declined to do that. They didn't do it. And that's part of the reason, that's another part of this puzzle. It all fits together. It's not just an isolated incident. It's not an isolated incident that oil fell from $100 a barrel to $30 a barrel. It's about 4 income tax cuts. It's about cutting the intangible tax. It's about granting exemptions to ad valorem taxes. It's all that pot of money and how they have sliced it away a little bit at a time. And now we have a state that can't provide basic services to their people at a level that most other states in the nation do.
Let me ask you a question, and this might be one more that we would discuss over coffee, so this is going to be maybe some of your opinion, but I think it's a question that is begging to be asked and maybe some type of an answer, but we all have become accustomed to a certain way of life from September to May, and that is the bands marching and the football teams playing and the sports and the extracurricular and the high steppers and the cheerleaders. and this may be just David Pennington's opinion, but it's one I think that we all would say is a valued opinion. When does all this go away?
You know, I think that without if we're still, if we haven't made a dramatic change in how we invest in young people. And remember, this is all an investment in students, which is an investment in our future. You know, we talk a lot in the state about economic development. We have to have a business-friendly climate. We got to do this. We got to do that. The best investment we make in the business in the state of Oklahoma, in the future and industry in the state of Oklahoma, is these young people that are in our schools. That's where we make our investment. You know, yeah, we can give a tax break to a business, but my guess is if you put all business people in a room and you really asked them what they needed, they would talk about quality employees. That's really what they want. Well-educated people, you know, all the things that you get a value of as you grow up and you mature and you become an adult, all the things that not only the community contributes to that and your family contributes to that, but also what the schools contribute to that. But if we don't change the level of investment that we're making, then I think you're probably looking at 2019, 2020, because again, what we look at as we try to project the future, we look at our fund balance. How much money do we have in the bank, so that if there's something that a catastrophe, or for instance this year there was a budget cut, that's kind of our comfort zone, right? It's like the savings account at your house. Our fund balance in our current budget is going right now. This next year we're going to carry over $3.4 million. When we finish this time next year, if everything works according to the budget we have in place, our fund balance is going to be $2 million. Okay, well, so that means we will have spent $1.6 million more than we brought in revenue. Now we've already made about $1.2 million worth of cuts. Okay, so that next year, as we look to 17, 18, if we've got a $2 million fund balance, we spent $1.6 million more than we had. So, you know, if we continue, that means the next year we've got a $400,000 fund balance, which means the next year we can't function. So we'll have to make some cuts next year to keep that fund balance even at $2 million. Okay, so what's left to cut? We cut 25 positions this year. What's really left to cut? Well, now you start looking at those things, you know, what do you have to do? What does the law require us to do? The law requires us that we teach kindergarten through 12th grade. And in kindergarten through 5th grade, we do that with one teacher with a classroom full of kids. We like to offer art, music, and PE in elementary schools. And we do that with teachers who are outside of the classroom. But, you know, you can do art in the classroom. You can do music. A teacher can stand up every day and have kids sing a song. Now, most of us wouldn't consider that maybe music class, but that meets the requirements of the law. You can take them to the gym and do something with them with that classroom teacher. Again, that meets the requirements of the law. When you get to the secondary level, you know, when you look at middle school, really 6, 7, 8, you're not required to offer math, science, English, social studies individual classes. I mean, we could put kids back into self-contained classrooms. Now, you got certification issues and that kind of stuff you have to work with, but, you know, you could theoretically do that. When you get to the high school, you have to offer 4 years of English, 4 years of math, 3 years of social studies, 3 years of science, 2 years of foreign language, and then after that, it's all optional, you know. And so what happens is all those classes that are not what we call core classes, those core positions start to disappear. Now, the problem with that is that, you kind of need places, as you divide those students up during a day, they need classes they can take. So you have to offer something. But, what it would be, how you would do it, maybe you make everybody take a PE class. And that's how you make every student take an art class. I mean, there's things you do that can help you make your schedule, but you don't offer the robust education that you want to offer. But that's really, those are the kind of things that are next. And when you start having that conversation, then you start having your extracurricular conversation. It's not, look, high steppers, football, those kinds of things, those aren't really, there's some expense, but they're not big expenses. We don't pay our coaches that much. There's some upkeep of the facilities, which is an expense. But if you cut out all of your athletic programs, you're not going to save a couple of $1 million. But what may happen is we may move athletics after school so that we get an additional hour of teaching out of all of those coaches because we've cut other positions and we need teachers in classrooms to teach kids. So I think you kind of see that kind of stuff first.
Trickle down effect.
It's just a trickle down, and then eventually you'll have to decide as a community what are our most important things. Mm-hmm. See, I think it's all important. So that's the problem I have when somebody talks to me about, we ought to do this. Look. I think it's all important. I think that having athletic programs is important. I think band, orchestra, music is important. Art's important. PE is important. Career tech's important. Home ec is important. Art at the elementary level is important. It's important those students get to go to a class and do art. It's important they get to go to music. It's important they get to go to PE. Those are not luxuries. Those are all important things. And the fact that we're even having this conversation just makes me so frustrated and so disappointed in my home. This is, like most of the people watching this, I'm a native Oklahoman. It's just hard for me to imagine that we've gotten ourselves in this position and we don't seem to have the political will to do anything about it, because it's politics. It's not, and I don't know what's going to happen. The election year is going to be interesting, but again, look, we have folks that we elected in this state who said they would never raise taxes, and they held true to that pledge in the face of a crushing economic collapse. They held firm. Now, hopefully, because I'm going to tell you that a lot of what happens next session is going to depend upon what happens in November in the elections. If we re-elect everybody who was in office this year, then they're going to see that as a stamp of approval by the state of Oklahoma that says, you know what, there have been some people fussing at us, but the reality is most people support what we're doing. That's why we got reelected. And I know in our area that we don't have an election. Senator Fields was not up for re-election this year. Representative Vaughn did not draw an opponent. Representative Pfeiffer over in the Blackwell area didn't draw an opponent. And that's fine. But if you're watching this and you are somebody that believes in public education and you believe that what we're doing is not right for students, it's not right for your children, it's not right for your grandchildren, then I strongly encourage you to find somebody to support that lives somewhere else and send them some money. Because at the end of the day, I hate it, I wish it wasn't this way, but winning in elections is about money. And the well-financed candidate typically wins, and I promise you the incumbents, the people that are running for re-election, they are well-financed. Because there is a certain segment of this state that those individuals have done exactly what those people want them to do. They've cut taxes because they wanted taxes cut. They've made it difficult for schools to stay open because that's their mindset. That's their view of the world. They think that when they look at common education, they look at wasteful spending is the way they evaluate it. They think government's too big and they want it to be smaller. And they don't care that DHS can't get out and provide the support that a family needs. They don't care that people can't get the medical care they need because they don't have insurance, they don't have Medicaid. They don't care about those things. Their view of the world, their view of the political system is just different than what reality is right now. And so it's a battle. Whose view is going to win? Are we going to be a compassionate society that invests in our children and our young people and takes care of those that are less fortunate? Or are we going to be a society that it's the best, everybody's for themselves and there's nothing, that we didn't do anything public, we'll just be a system of private schools, and if you got a lot of money, you can afford a great education for your child. If you don't have a lot of money, you just get what's left, and your child can never have the education they need to have a future other than whatever you get from a low educated, whatever a low education allows you to do. And that's where we are.
Thanks for your answer to a very tough question. Thanks for your time this month, and continue a great summer. And we will talk to Dr. Pennington in July as well. For Chris Adams behind the camera, for Dr. Pennington, I'm Phil Turney.